Those who will be in the public gallery that they're welcome to use mobile devices as long as they are in airplane mode and that all devices are muted. It's not permitted to take photographs or record any part of the meeting. Declarations of interest. Members, are there any new interests to declare, not declared at our first meeting, that are relevant to matters under discussion this week? Okay, I have no apologies to note, and Patsy will be joining us shortly. Agenda item 2, Chairperson's business. Members, at our meeting on the 14th of November, we agreed to arrange a virtual meeting with Professor Bell, Chair of the UK Government Migration Advisory Committee, otherwise known as MAC. The following is proposed. Thursday, the 20th of February, has been held in his diary from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. However, as the Home Office do not use Zoom, the meeting will be held on MS Teams. And this will be in room 106 at 10 a.m. prior to the formal committee meeting, which will then commence in here at 11 a.m. It is planned that the meeting will be an exchange of information, views and a discussion on the MAC report on the seasonal worker visa review published on the 16th of July 2024. Have members any comments, or are you content to proceed with that informal meeting and the team will confirm with Professor Bell? Thank you, members. Members, regarding the 2 written briefings that have been on our forward work plan for today, the DERA Corporate Plan 25 to 27 and the consultation on the Strategic Environmental Assessment Environmental Report for the Combined Ammonia Strategy and Operational Protocol, both were postponed at relatively short notice as they were not ready yet to come to committee. The Department are still working on that. Are there any comments to make on that? No? Thank you, members. Agenda item 3, minutes of the meeting on the 30th of January. I refer members to pages 5 to 20 of the pack for the draft minutes dated the 30th of January. Do members have any comments in regard to the minutes as drafted? And if not, I'll sign them and they will be published on the website. Content? Thank you, members. Thank you. Okay. Agenda item 4, matters arising. I refer you to pages 22 to 25 of the pack to the response from the Department dated 30th of January in reply to our request made at the meeting of the 16th of January regarding the step-by-step planning guidance for applicants and an update on the resources and expertise within NIEA. The response states that work on the proposed guidance has been initiated. However, due to preparatory work for Dalradian public inquiry, progress is slower than anticipated, and it is expected that a draft will be available by the 30th of April, which will then be forwarded to the committee for comment. Members, in relation to staffing levels and expertise, the Department states that NIEA is taking steps to redeploy staff with suitable experience into planning teams within the Natural Environment Division. The response also states that planning vacancies at all grades are being addressed, but competitions can take time to initiate, but confirm that further recruitment of higher scientific officers is nearing completion. However, there will be a time lag before a significant improvement in planning response rates will be achieved. Do members have any comments to make? Are you content to note? Content to note. Thank you. Thank you. Members, I refer you to correspondence from the Department dated the 28th of January, pages 26 to 44 of the pack in relation to the Greenhouse Gas Emissions Trading Scheme Amendment Number 2 Order 2025. The Department is giving advance notice of the laying before the Assembly of this statutory instrument. The SI will amend the Greenhouse Gas Emissions Trading Scheme Order 2020. The Department is due to give an oral briefing on this matter at our meeting on the 27th of February. Are there any comments, or are you content to note until that meeting? Thank you, members. Members, I refer you to pages 4 to 7 of the tabled papers for the response from the Department in relation to the Canine Breeders Northern Ireland CBNI. After our meeting on the 16th of January, we wrote to the Department in support of the inclusion of CBNI in such departmental groups going forward and queried why CBNI had not been included to date. The Department states that CBNI also wrote to the Minister raising the same issue on the 14th of January, and he did respond to them to provide clarification in relation to stakeholder events, which are stated as high-level discussions in respect of potential animal welfare reforms to assist in prioritising reforms for the remainder of this mandate, not about the detail of any policies as such, and for example, Lucy's Law. The response states that CBNI had met DERA officials last May, and the views expressed at that meeting by CBNI had been given consideration as part of the policy development process to date. The Department states that all stakeholders and organisations, including CBNI, will have the opportunity to consider the detail of any of the policy proposals when they are raised for public consultation. The Department has offered a further meeting with officials to CBNI. Members, any comments they want to make or content to note? And we'll convey that response to CBNI. Yep. Okay. Members, I refer you to the response from the Department dated the 4th of February at pages 8 to 10 of the tabled papers. And that's in reply to our letter of the 27th of January regarding overtime support for the Erne Pike Classics and the Classic Fishing Festival in Fermanagh. Members, the response states that the Minister recognises the positive impact of the angling competitions and the wider benefits that this brings to the local economy. Budget pressures have led to a reduction in outreach activity. However, the Department states that it will continue to support the Fermanagh Classic and the Pike Classic by making the public angling estate available for use. Officials have engaged with the Fermanagh and Omagh District Council to enable support for the Fermanagh Classic and will also engage with the organisers of the Erne Pike Classic to agree arrangements. Have any members any comments to make? Are you prepared? Happy enough to note? Yep. Thank you. Members, I refer you to pages 11 to 18 of the tabled papers to a response from the Department dated the 4th of February in reply to our letter on the 17th of January seeking a response from DAERA on issues raised by Solus regarding the Environmental Protection Single-Use Vape Regulations 2024. The Department states that a UK-wide impact assessment was completed in March 2024 and it's estimated that the cost attributable to local councils in Northern Ireland would be around 5.68 million per year. This is before any savings from reduced clean-up costs and costs of incorrect disposal are attributed. Once the ban on single-use vapes come into operation on June the 1st, it is anticipated that the number in circulation will fall dramatically over a relatively short period of time. Members, the Department also states that it is currently drafting legislation which will ensure that businesses breaching the ban will be required to dispose of the banned vapes at their own cost. It is estimated that for Northern Ireland there will be 6 or 7 prosecutions per year. Members, the Department believes that some manufacturers are adapting product design in advance of the ban, and this is a positive outcome to decrease the volume of throwaway and difficult to process waste items. The Department views the ban on single-use vapes as complementary to the provisions of the Tobacco and Vapes Bill and does not believe that the ban will significantly increase enforcement workloads and/or associated costs. DAERA is currently in discussions with the Department of Health with a view to a joined-up approach on tobacco enforcement and the implementation of the ban. Members, DAERA also advises that a meeting with Environmental Health Northern Ireland was held on the 12th of December and officials will continue to engage as this work progresses. The Department has also stated it will also respond directly to Solus to offer a meeting to directly address the issues raised in its correspondence to the committee. Members, have you any comments to make on this? Are you content to note? Thank you, members. Matters Rising number 6, I refer you to pages 19 to 20 of the table papers to a draft letter for your consideration regarding our further queries to DAERA in relation to the ISNI delivery tracking system. That's the investing activity reports on construction projects. The committee considered the most recent ISNI DTS investing activity report dated on the 26th of January. We looked at that on the 30th of January and we had further queries and comments. Do you have anything to add to the letter, or are you content it is sent to the Department as drafted? That was on pages 19 to 20 of your table papers, members. Content? Yep, Clark?
This was particularly of interest to Patsy.
Yep.
So
if members are minded, it was Patsy that had a significant interest in this, so I'll draw it to Patsy's attention again. I have nothing else to add to it, but if members are content, I'll just draw this attention just to make sure that he's content. Happy enough? Thank you, members. Okay, we're going to bring agenda item 5 back. We're going to move to agenda item 6, if that's okay, guys. Agenda item 6 is the oral briefing from Aquaculture NI. I refer you to the following papers for this item. Pages 173 to 183 of the pack for the Aquaculture Representatives Group briefing paper. Pages 57 to 78 of the table papers, that's the ARG additional paper. Pages 180 to 183 of the pack for the response from the Department in reply to our letter of the 20th of September regarding rebuilding the aquaculture sector. We considered that the responses at our meeting on the 3rd of October and forwarded it to Aquaculture NI for their comments. They responded to us highlighting their concerns for the lack of practical support for the sector from the Department and requested the opportunity to brief the committee. And members, to recap, the departmental response addressed current and future challenges and supporting a balanced industry-led sustainable growth of aquaculture. The Minister noted that he had agreed policy themes for inclusion in a forthcoming fisheries bill for supporting the sustainable development of all aquaculture subsectors. The response also noted various actions in process to address water quality. The Department also referred to financial support as Minister Muir opened the Marine Environment and Fisheries Fund in July 2024. Members, I welcome the following representatives from Aquaculture NI to brief the committee and then to answer any questions after the briefing. They are Mr Rod Capel, Aquaculture Representative Group, Facilitator of Aquaculture NI, Mr Raymond Mayers, Trout Farmer, and Mark McAllister, Trout Farmer. Thank you for your attendance, and the floor is now yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thanks for the opportunity to discuss Northern Ireland's aquaculture sector with you today. I'm Rod Capel, Facilitator for the Northern Ireland Aquaculture Representative Group, which supports over 25 Northern Ireland businesses, award-winning producers of shellfish, oysters and mussels, fish, trout and salmon, and seaweed. In 2022, aquaculture operators produced around 4,500 tonnes of fish and shellfish, valued at over £14 million. Sadly, in recent years, we've seen a reduction in production, mainly due to a significant drop in mussel production and no growth in finfish production. Outside of my role with ARG, I own a long-established company called Poseidon that works globally on sustainable fisheries and aquaculture development. Working overseas and living here in Northern Ireland for the past 15 years really brings it home to me that Northern Ireland is not supporting its aquaculture sector and it's missing out on investment as a result. And the economic and environmental benefits that growth would bring are not happening. I'd like to give my apologies from oyster and mussel producers who wanted to be here, but they're battling tides and staff shortages, and some are overseas trying to sell their product in export markets, but I'll do my best to give some of their perspectives. But to provide first-hand experience, I'd like to introduce Raymond Mayers and Mark McAllister. Raymond.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak directly to you today. Like most aquaculture producers in Northern Ireland, I operate a small family business. I started in 1969, whenever I took over the first commercial trout farm to be constructed in Northern Ireland, just outside Ballyclare. I moved to Crumlin in 1977 and built another trout farm, which I still operate. In 1987, I developed a site at Portna, Kilrea, which remains as one of the larger trout production sites in the UK. I work closely with highly skilled local fish processors to provide quality trout to the food retails and food service sectors, in addition to disease-free live rainbow and brown trout for angling. During the course of the last year, Glenoak Fisheries exported trout to England, Scotland, Ireland, France and Spain. There's a strong demand for Glenoak product. We have invested in new facilities and advanced technology to develop the business. However, I find that my ability to supply the market is being actively negated by dairy decisions, sometimes indecisions, and reducing water quality. My sites are actually having to improve the water quality as it comes in before I can risk letting it reach my stock. This has a significant cost. The water quality also affects growth of the stock. There's a real opportunity for me to develop my business, but this is a serious uphill struggle. My purpose of being here today is to bring this to the attention of the committee and seek your support in overcoming unnecessary obstacles that are holding back the whole sector. Mark.
Michael, good morning. My name is Mark McAllister, and this is not my natural environment. I have been running the family business in Blue Valley Fish Farm since 1987. We're located on the Ballinderry River outside Cookstown. The river is both ASSI and SAC status. We work along trying to monitor water quality and report it on a 365, 24-hour basis, should there be any pollution in the river, towards NIEA, I should say. The farm is a modern mechanised farm, which was constructed with the help of grants from both DAERA and the EU. We produce rainbow trout. We grow them from eggs in our hatchery. To a range of final products for the food sector and live trout for the angling community. Since 2004, we've also been involved in organic sea trout and salmon farming in the Republic of Ireland. I'm also a member of the FU Rural Enterprise Committee. I acknowledge the opportunity today afforded to me to be here this morning, but it was with regret that I feel I need to appear before you to convey the unnecessary challenges facing our industry from unparalleled legislation being implemented unfairly. Rod.
Thanks, Mark. So we provided a couple of briefing documents to you, one back in August and one just recently. The points made in our letter to the committee in August are still very relevant, and if anything, the situation has worsened. DERA and its agencies are implementing regulation in isolation, disproportionately and without adequate support or a plan to enable the aquaculture sector to grow. This departmental approach makes no attempt to enable operators to pursue best practice, which should result in regulatory compliance. But how they work simply enforces regulation with the result that operators are struggling to maintain their operations and their businesses are unable to grow. Raymond can give his first-hand experience on this.
As I said at the beginning, I've been at this since 1969. I've been very fortunate to be put in the position of leading the sector at Northern Ireland, UK and European level in relation to engaging with government. And as part of that, I was chairman of the Northern Ireland Seafood during the 1990s and 2000s for a period of about 10 years. That covered the complete seafood sector in Northern Ireland, the processors, Kilkeel, Portavogie, Ardglass, as well as aquaculture. We worked closely with the department to support sustainability and the development of the complete sector in Northern Ireland. Significant investment was made at that time by the sector with the support of government. This included direct investment by the department in its own aquaculture sites at Bushmills and Mavanacher for salmon and trout. The department also invested heavily in the creation of angling club hatcheries for the enhancement of our rivers and lakes. All of this was accomplished with close and open engagement between the various strands of the fish sector and government. In recent years, we find there's actually a complete reversal of department actions. The facilities created at significant expense in both Bushmills and Mavanacher have closed. Angling club hatcheries are prevented from stocking their own club waters, so have become redundant. During a meeting on matters that fundamentally impact on my own operations, I asked permission from senior officials in the department to engage with their experts in order to discuss how best to find an agreed outcome or a solution. I was told that's not the way the department works. You submit information and the department decides if it's acceptable or not. There was no engagement. What the department is currently doing is simply enforcing what are well known to be out-of-date regulations. This is a complete opposite of how the sector and the department operated for decades. As an individual producer, I wish to be compliant with all of my operations, but there's no communication from the department to support best practice and compliance. Not only would it help to sustain and develop the sector, it would actually reduce departmental costs as staff time would be freed up to engage in more positive and productive activity. And to that end, although it is, you consider an out-of-date document, in your briefing papers for today, you will have this document here, which is page 2 from a discharge consent charging scheme that was agreed between the sector and the Department of Environment after a period of about 2 to 3 years of close negotiation for what would be best practice. And would draw your attention to the fact that the DOE at that time said the fish farming sector is the only industrial sector that operates in a manner that is unlikely to cause either chronic or acute water problems. Nothing's changed, except the department's attitude. More importantly, the department would be allowed or would be able to deploy valuable field resources while at the same time reducing the administrative time and cost burden to fish farmers. The proposal is in line with current government thinking with regard to regulation of small businesses as covered in the Hampton Report 2004, and the Hampton Report looks at more efficient approaches to regulatory inspection and enforcement and stresses that good enforcement should be simple, consistent, proportionate and based on risk assessment. The proposed scheme, which is the discharge consent charging scheme, also addresses the unique nature of fish farming operations and the high compliance of the sector. As I said, nothing has changed. However, we appear to have lost the rapport and the positive engagement in taking the sector forward. Thank you. But how do we deal with this? What happened previously, whenever I was chair of the Northern Ireland seafood sector, was that from top down, there were regular meetings between the sector and government, from secretary level, who therefore was able to bring in the appropriate officials to meetings every 6 months, and they had to put on the table what they were doing, what they weren't doing, and therefore the sector had the opportunity of contributing and having a positive conversation with them. Unfortunately, there was change at high level back in about 15 years ago, and that just stopped. We need to get back to a situation where there are regular biannual meetings between the Permanent Secretary, senior officials, and the aquaculture sector. Thank you, Rod.
Thanks, Raymond. So our submissions mentioned a range of issues, and we know we don't have time to go into all those issues today, but we do want to highlight this issue of water quality that affects all of our producers, both in the freshwater environment and the marine environment, before we mention overall sector development. So I'd like Mark to mention his experience with water quality.
Thank you, Rod. As a letter from DARD, which Raymond has mentioned, stated aquaculture is not a pollution risk. Yet we have spent 18 years trying to engage with the NIEA to develop an abstraction policy for aquaculture without success. It's worth noting that we are not the only ones identifying these issues. The Office of Environmental Protection, OEP, has issued multiple findings against DERA and NIEA for not applying the Water Framework Directive regulations correctly and failings in developing the river basin management plans. Yet even though these overall frameworks are not correct, NIE are still pushing forward with it disproportionately and imposing regulation on our few trout farmers. It appears that NIA are intent on misusing the OEP process to avoid meaningful engagement. This is the exact opposite to how the DOE engaged previously, which resulted in an agreed and positive outcomes for all parties. All of this time consuming is extremely expensive for both the department and the sector. It is also avoidable. The sector depends on good water quality for our operations. We just borrow the water for a short time and at times even put it back in better condition than we got it. However, it appears not to be understood by the organisation charged with maintaining and improving water quality in Northern Ireland through the river basin management plans. Unfortunately, aquaculture is not included in these plans, even though we engaged during the stages they were established. The OEP has identified the significance of river basin management plans in recent engagements with the department. It is not clear how NIE can proceed with their implemented procedure in the absence of a river basin management plan, particularly as only last week when we had a meeting with them, they informed us that the abstraction implementation team had never spoken to the team that is responsible for the river basin management plan, and they sit beside each other. However, to summarise, the Water Framework Directive, all the legislation we're talking about today is from the Water Framework Directive. And if you Google it, you'll find there's 3 elements to it: environmental, social and economic. If those 3 elements are applied properly and not disproportionately in a balanced way, the industry is more than happy to support it in its entirety. It gives range and scope for everybody to exist and prosper in it. We suggest NIE should follow proper procedure and, based on evidence, be proportionate and risk-based in implementing of this legislation. And as a matter of interest, just to put it into context, in the north of Ireland there are 38,780 kilometres of waterways, of which 3 are affected by aquaculture, inland aquaculture. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. On coastal water quality, on behalf of the oyster and mussel producers within the ARG, who are highly dependent on good water quality as well, but also perhaps uniquely for food production by filtering the water, absorbing algae, nutrients and carbon. Shellfish production actually provides significant environmental services to coastal waters like Belfast Lough. You may have seen the articles in the BBC Spotlight programme about the deteriorating water quality in Belfast Lough, and that included some of our producers in Belfast Lough producing mussels. A ton of mussels filters enough water per day to fill 4 Olympic-sized swimming pools. We used to have 10,000 tonnes of mussel production in Belfast Lough. Today, we're down to less than 1,000. NI Water has actually quantified mussel's contribution to water quality in Belfast Lough. Without that mussel production, the public purse would need to spend an additional £50 million on increased water treatment capacity, and that would cost an additional £1.5 million per year to operate. But the industry in Belfast Lough is hanging by a thread, building up production back to that 10,000 tonnes that we saw in 2010 would provide those major water treatment benefits that NI Water and the Belfast and Northern Ireland public is dependent on. But we need to overcome 2 major challenges. That's the poor water quality overall that's accompanied by an inadequate testing regime and a shortage of mussel seed. We go into more detail on those aspects in the briefing papers, so I won't say any more on those, but it will be too late to just wait. It seems DERA's waiting for Northern Ireland Water's Living with Water programme to deliver everything. And DERA's environmental improvement plan will be yet another strategy with lots of words and no action. DERA could take positive action now to improve the water quality in Belfast Lough by actively supporting the recovery of mussel production. We suggest that the shellfish water sampling regime should be revised to ensure it's fit for purpose so that operators can operate correctly. And the Northern Ireland Government could take positive action to improve that water quality by helping mussel production recover to these previous sustainable levels. And finally, on aquaculture sector development overall, we'd just like to mention that we appreciate the Minister's instructed DERA to support the sustainable development of all aquaculture subsectors. In practice, the opposite is happening, as you've heard, and we can't wait for a new fisheries bill in 2027 because this in itself will mainly revise the licensing process. That's of course much needed, but there won't be any future aquaculture applications for licenses as the current regulatory regime and lack of support is so off-putting. Potential investors are simply going elsewhere. Northern Ireland operators need this active support. We know the sector's small compared to farming, so realistically the resources allocated will be small. But if it remains like this, the opportunity for Northern Ireland to produce more healthy, low-carbon food that actually improves the environment will be lost. The Minister launched the Northern Ireland Food Strategy Framework in November. It states the term food includes food, drink, fish, and marine. But aquaculture product producers have had no involvement to date in this. Aquaculture is a sustainable, low-carbon food, and it's a sector that can contribute to all strategic priorities of the Food Strategy Framework. It doesn't need the costly transformation that agriculture needs. We're already producing what is termed future food. We just need to be part of the plan, and growing the sector in Northern Ireland will ensure it can make a more significant contribution. The strategy states there's going to be action plans developed, and we ask for aquaculture to be included in the implementation of the Food Strategy Framework and the aquaculture action plan is developed. Now, we appreciate Northern Ireland aquaculture sector is less visible. A lot of it happens in waters and on the bottom of the seabed in Belfast Lough and Carlingford Lough, so it's out of sight and less visible. It's not so well known as other food production sectors, but our members would be very happy to show committee members around some of their farms and production operations, and in the future we can discuss how to grow Northern Ireland's aquaculture sector. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Shouldn't critique presentations, but that was excellent. And certainly, to take your point, Mark, you were not like you weren't in a foreign environment. I think you must have practiced that. Genuine. It was really, really good. And thank you for the papers that you've presented because there's a lot of detail in there. I don't know if you were bored enough to be watching the Assembly this week, but there was a question to the Minister in regard to brown trout in particular, but it was to do more with Lough Neagh and perhaps overfishing, I think, if I've picked it up right, in terms of the brown trout to possibly migrate into the rivers and stuff. I don't know if you want to touch on that. I haven't really got a question. What I'm doing is I'm saying there are some MLAs who are active in this space already, and there might be a corollary there. So I'm going to bounce in with a couple of questions, if that's okay, and whoever wants to take them. So you talked about the department either having no input, or I read in the paper some unwelcome input. So I'm reading in around the zebra mussels piece in particular, where a fishery was closed, and in the document it talks about the door being, the stable door being bolted after the action, and then a disproportionate approach, perhaps towards aquaculture, that wasn't applied to other industry, including boating and that type of stuff. Is there something that you think can be done, should be done, in the terms of where the Department of Minister is facing in regard to particularly to the problems in Lough Neagh?
I'll pick that one up since it's me that's affected. Okay.
Declaration of interest.
I own the trout farm at Portna, Kilray, Lough Neagh Fisheries, and it was in my presentation a verbatim quote from the senior officials of the department who were asked to attend the farm to explain why they had completely changed their own advice to me that I'd operated under for the previous 4 months. And the answer was, you supply us with information and we'll tell you whether we agree with it or not. But they'd no intention to do that whatsoever. Needless to say, I produced a 38-page report showing exactly how I could be compliant, and they said, no, you've got to be 100% compliant because the wildlife order says A, B and C. But whenever you actually take a look at the papers they sent me, they misquote the wildlife order. They leave key words out, which completely changes the meaning of what is actually said. If I want to move fish, and I had an opportunity to sell a lot of live fish to Scotland, I need to have a movement permit or a health certificate. And the department changed their approach to me in September 2023 after issuing 10 movement permits after the zebra mussels were allegedly found at Mavanaker. They issued the permits. I moved them all around Northern Ireland, taking appropriate precautions. I then received 2 emails within 3 days of each other, which said completely different things. And whenever I tried to get answers to it, I just stonewalled. So you have a completely strange situation in that there appears to be a policy within the department, or a decision made within the department, to cease the movement of fish out of Mavanaker. And that's a very opaque grey area. But it now has been applied to me. That is a significant commercial impact. At the same time, the same regulations are not applied to the Toom eel fishery, which is in exactly the same situation. And there is the very strange situation that the department funds the Toom eel fishery to several £1 million in the past few years to move elvers, juveniles, from zebra-infested waters in the UK and Europe into Lough Neagh, and at the same time allows live eels to be exported to the UK and Holland without any precautions whatsoever other than clean water.
And that's the piece that piqued my interest. Is it one is disproportionate, and one disproportionate application or an unfair application potentially is of the same.
We have the facilities at our premises to depurate. We have borehole water, we have recirculation systems, we have investigated it thoroughly. We know that the Zebra Mussel Strategy 2004-2010 is a comprehensive document, sets out where the risks are, but the department, you have a situation where they're talking about the zebra mussels being at risk, but there's a sign at the gate of my premises at Portna which doesn't even mention zebra mussels. And it's supposed to be advice.
Thank you. Rod?
Could I just add to that? DERA quite rightly took AFBI advice in relation to zebra mussels and what appropriate protocols could be. And they provided lengthy advice, comprehensive protocols that the industry can comply with. They just latched on to that final bit that scientists always say, it can't be 100% risk-free. So consequently, they've sort of gone into lockdown and says, well, because it's not 100% risk-free, we're not allowing it. And that's not as the wildlife order suggests, reasonable.
And the point is lockdown for some but not for others.
Yes.
Is the point that I'm trying to
Yes.
get at. I'm going to, and if we can maybe keep our answers briefer, because I know there's interest here from members, no, and I appreciate it because it's incredibly interesting. And seems to be good mussels, bad mussels. So there was a lot in there about reintroduction or a bit of work going into mussels, particularly in Belfast Loch,
Yes.
which is part of Belfast Harbour. Just interested in, I'm sure you're possibly not the group to ask, but I'm looking at the development in and around Belfast Harbour and the value that is being developed through Belfast Harbour. Are you aware of any quid pro quo between the department, Belfast Harbour in particular, which seems to be booming, but the impact is obviously going to be environmental, I would imagine ecological, but where that could be used in tandem to fund the ask that you're making today, which is the increase again of mussel production in that area?
Absolutely. That doesn't exist as far as I'm aware, but that is certainly the case. That developments that we see, some of our work in the Netherlands, for example, when Rotterdam Harbour expanded, they were required to introduce quite extensive mitigation measures, which assisted the fisheries and aquaculture producers in the surrounding area. Absolutely, the same principle could be applied here, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And I'm going to let the members in shortly, but I've got two very brief ones, if you don't mind. So it's just, in terms of the River Basin Management Plan, obviously it's a consultation that goes out, it'll be June 2027 again for consultation. How do you view the application of it at the moment and its efficacy in its current form, and that impacted on yourselves? And then the last point is, I'm interested in this food strategy piece that there's no voice in there. Probably for aquaculture you'd be alluding to. I'm also aware, and the Minister has picked this up to be fair, so I know he's listening, where dietitians aren't actually included in that food strategy piece, which is incredible with what we're learning about what's good for your gut, is good for the rest of you kind of approaches. Could you just even make comments on those 2 points, and then I'm going to move to other members?
The Water Framework Directive, the River Basin Management Plan, in the first two editions of that we had no input, and they just overshot our industry. The present one has been commented on by the OEP, the report that came in here in September, and it has basically been bombasted, a 183-page report, and from saying that they think it is unlawful because they haven't consulted properly, and through to how they actually enact the Water Basin Management Plan here. Firstly, they're supposed to classify all the rivers, and then once you classify the river, you actually decide what abstraction, what level of objectives you're aiming for on that river. To give you an idea, the southeast of England have over 50% of their rivers designated either heavily or artificially modified. Here, one stretch of river. And the maps, yet again, the WP bombasted because we can't make out head or tail of the maps. There's no key with the maps. There's no instruction to use the maps. So basically, so it was supposed to be published and come into force in 2021 to 27. It's a 6-year cycle. They still are making a draft of the 21 to 27, and OEP has said that really needs to be looked at again, and elements of it changed completely. So it's not fit for purpose at present. And the problem is NIEA, to regulate us, are now using something which has been knocked down by the OEP and is basically incorrect. The Water Framework Directive is a wonderful document. It's 3 strands of it. If it's all applied fairly and equally, it lets everything flourish, both environmentally, social and economic. It's a great document.
And then on the food strategy, yes, aquaculture wasn't included. To be fair, I've been in post a couple of years on a part-time basis, and I think the consultation on it was perhaps 2021 or something, which might have been when the ARG was sort of less active, like following COVID and Brexit got rid of the funding of it. So it may be that there was just that sort of window where we didn't have the opportunity to input, and the sector, therefore our voice wasn't heard. But we hope we can rectify that.
Yeah, and on that one, I particularly think the Minister is genuinely interested in widening that voice out. So, okay, so in terms of members then, I've got Declan followed by John and then Michelle. So Declan, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that presentation. You mentioned a couple of things in the presentation about unfair legislation and enforcing legislation out of date, out of out-of-date legislation. What specific legislations would you be referring to there that needs to be updated and which are unfair?
Well, I'm sure you're aware the Fisheries Act is from 1966, so you know that's outdated and no longer fit for purpose. And there are plans for a new Fisheries Act, which I would say on the positive side we've had good discussion on co-design related to that. The problem is that really only focuses on the licensing and future licensing effectively. There's a lot of legislation that is being applied to existing operators like Raymond and Mark that is being applied disproportionately. So, Raymond.
To give you 2 examples, 66 Fisheries Act was enabling legislation and enabled the establishment of aquaculture, trout farming in Northern Ireland back in the 1960s, and there was a lot of positive work done by the department of that time. So therefore every site in Northern Ireland has a licence to operate. In recent times it has been suggested that aquaculture sites, to comply with the 66 Fisheries Act, should shut down every Sunday for 24 hours and stop the water coming into the site. You know, the water that the fish swim in, the water that means that everything would be dead in 10 minutes. But yet, that's an official position from senior officials within the department. Secondly, in relation to abstraction, I received a letter, 3-page letter in September last year, suggesting that my abstraction has had serious or potential serious effects on killing fish in the rivers. Okay? Statement. And it quoted scientific reports, so I followed up with it on 2 occasions. And eventually I got reports. I got 4 reports. One of them was on the tagging of 15 smolts in a river. 15 smolts out of the hundreds of thousands of smolts that go out from the rivers in Northern Ireland. Second report was about pike eating small brown trout in Lough Erne. And the third one was that seals eat salmon smolts in the River Bush estuary at Bushmills. Absolutely no information whatsoever to sustain the statement that they made.
So they're applying and implementing legislation without good evidence, basically.
Without any evidence.
Without any evidence, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, just one last question then is the Minister opened the Marine Environment and Fisheries Fund last year. What would be your assessment of that?
Well, it was eventually opened in July, and they said it's going to be closed in November. So the window was extremely narrow for operators to get applications in. And then the other point is, given that it was a single year fund and had to be spread between fisheries, aquaculture and seafood processing, for example, if there are any major developments like the one we hope can happen on seed collection in Belfast Lough, the money just isn't there. They want to share it all around and it spreads very thin, and anything substantial that's going to really shift the dial as far as growth is concerned, the funds aren't there to support it. So it was kind of too little too late. We're assured that this year the new fund is going to be open from April, from the start of financial year, and there will be a wider funding window, but yet again it's another single year fund. So that does still limit the strategic development of the sector.
Can I make 2 quick points? Yeah. One is that in the current climate where we are being lambasted by the department, who's going to spend money? You know, it's actually discouraging investment. And the second thing is, despite that, I actually made an application. And my application is actually to look and investigate whether or not it is possible to filter out blue-green algae. And I hope to work with AFBI in relation to water monitoring during the course of next year in order to follow through on that. So at least somebody is trying to do something positive about it.
To tackle poor water quality.
Yeah.
Thank you. John Blair.
Chair, yeah, thank you. In the interest of transparency, Chair, I'm going to tell the meeting that I have visited some of the sites that might be referred to today, spoken with operators and also spoken with those concerned about abstraction at certain points. But I do want to say thanks to all who have presented, and particularly thanks for bringing the attention to the state of our waters, including our sea waters, and that's getting more attention more recently than ever before. The impact on the sector, which hasn't been profiled that highly, in fairness, and also the wider issue, Chair, which you and others would have heard me up before, of the impact on the department's own public angling estate in the first instance, but also other hatcheries and the wider angling product in Northern Ireland. First question, pretty succinct one, the water quality as a starting point. What are the biggest impacts on water quality that's leading to a decline in quality?
I don't think that I can provide a short answer to that one, but I will try.
Up to the chair, that's up to the chair.
From my personal experience, what I'm seeing is that there is and has been a continuous reduction in the water quality over. I've been in operation for 50 plus years. You see it going down every year. And primarily what we're looking at is the oxygen level in the river, because that's what the fish need to survive. And I have had to invest several £100,000 in the past 10 years on buying hospital-grade oxygen generators to actually increase and improve the oxygen level in the river coming in, because otherwise it would kill the fish. Just whenever 2 years ago they opened up the lock gates at Toon Bridge and let all the blue-green algae down the river, 48 hours before Mavanaghur closed, it crashed the oxygen level in the river to lethal levels. I recorded 2.8 milligrams per litre coming in. You need a minimum of 7, and normally the river's 8, 9, 10. It just crashed it. It would have killed everything in the river. The second thing is we're seeing higher levels of organic material, which actually has a similar effect with biological oxygen demand. And therefore we've got to be very, very careful as to how we deal with that. We have disease-free status in Northern Ireland, so therefore what we're looking at is making sure that the fish are always healthy. We don't use injections or chemicals or anything like that. So therefore whenever we get inspections from international certification bodies coming over and say, you don't use anything, they don't believe you, but we actually don't, because we don't need to. There's no such thing as a non-commercial disease, so we don't want it, we keep it out. So there is an issue, oxygen and biological.
Does the sector have a view on what's causing that reduction in reduced water quality and reduced oxygen levels? The source of the problem?
It's what is known publicly. It is a combination of increased human and agricultural activity generally in Northern Ireland.
Pollution, basically.
Yeah, pollution.
In coastal waters, the issue is the E. coli levels, because oyster and mussel producers want to sell their product live. The Food Standards Agency classifies the waters A, B and C. A, if it's fine to eat straight out of the water. B, if you need to filter it. And C, if you can only sell it into a cooked market. That cooked market is an extremely low price, and it's not economic to achieve that. FSA has downgraded Belfast Lough water quality to Class C for all areas apart from one single area, which is now a BC. So it's E. coli levels, and that's from agri and sewage, basically.
Chair, I'm going to, in the interest of time, combine two questions here. You might be relieved to know. The next question is, given the impact on the hatcheries from recent developments, and in particular those hatcheries around the band systems area, can I ask, what formal consultation has there been with yourselves with regard to the development of the forthcoming fisheries bill? The current bill is the same age as me, as I understand it, so it wasn't written yesterday, to say the least. And according to the date on the cover of it, and I'm keen to know. I mean, it should be, and I hope it is, a huge piece of work. I also hope it's done in a timely way. However, I'm keen to know that, and I'll be asking the same thing if I get the opportunity, the Ulster Angling Federation, environmental groups and others, but what formal consultation has there been at this stage with yourselves?
Well, we've had good discussions with DERA and approaching it as a co-design practice. So we do at least feel listened to. We're yet to see the draft because they're speaking to many other parties, so we don't actually know as yet quite where our voice is going to appear within the draft text, but we do at least feel listened to because we've had a number of meetings with the individual subsectors regarding that particular point specifically on the bill, but we haven't seen the results. The devil's going to be in the detail, for sure.
That's encouraging, and look, it's up to colleagues here as well, but my own feeling is from today's discussion we probably will need to have further conversations with the inland fisheries section of the department as well. And the second question's directly, the final question, sorry, directly related to the last one there. The consultations on the business of abstraction licensing. Now, look, up front, I get representation from those who operate hatcheries, and I get representation from those who are concerned about water levels close to or immediately adjacent to hatcheries. And that is the reality, and that is the position that we have to try and find our way through. Our conversations with the sector around that issue, given that it's been in almost, you could say, in draft form since 2008 and never properly firmed up in lots of instances, are those conversations part of the fisheries bill consultation, or are they being dealt with separately as a review of abstractions? And again, if that's the case, what conversations are there being had with yourselves?
They're being dealt with separately, and the conversations with NIEA, but we did feel the need to submit a letter to the OEP putting in some clarifications. Basically, NIEA has to report progress on the action plan to rectify what they've been doing in relation to abstraction licensing, and we felt there were a number of errors within how they were suggesting consultation had occurred. There hadn't been any effective consultation, and yet they were saying we've been working through an industry working group for a number of years. That just hadn't been happening. We had a conversation with NIEA on this matter last week, which we viewed as an attempt to kind of reset arrangements. But as Mark said, if they aren't applying the overall framework of the Water Framework Directive and River Basin Management Planning, and yet they're still trying to push ahead on the abstraction side, that's the detail that we're talking about, that they just don't have the evidence or the right framework to apply as yet. So we feel the cart's before the horse there.
Chair, with your permission, so for clarification, this review's been done jointly with NIEA and Inland Fisheries?
No, it's just NIEA.
In relation to that, I think it's worthwhile referring back to the document that I highlighted earlier in relation to discharge consent. That work was concluded under the Water Act 1999 and just came in advance of the abstraction and impounding licensing legislation 2006. And as we understood it, that was the reason why deemed licences were issued to us. There was a major presentation at Loughry College in March 2006 in relation to abstraction licensing. We were invited in June of the same year, 2006, to meet the officials in Lisburn Road, Antrim Road, Lisburn, and we were then invited to make applications for deemed licences, which were issued to the complete sector within the next 12 months. And since then, we've been trying to have meetings to actually have the same working group type that we had for discharge consents. And as far as I'm concerned, because I was involved in the other ones, we haven't yet had a single meeting where there's either been honesty or they've listened to us. And that's been blunt. We've had documents tabled and then withdrawn without explanation and without dialogue.
Chair, I have no further questions, but I think for us to know, it might be useful to clarify with the department if there is also an internal review of abstractions. My understanding is that is taking place, and whether then the review by the Environment Agency is separate, or whether that's a coordinated approach.
Very, very good point, John. And just in the interest of time, guys, we just say we'll have another presentation shortly, and I hate to even put that out there because this is really, really interesting. Really enjoying this session. We've got Michelle and then Patsy.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Michelle.
And thank you for your presentation. And actually, your written briefing in advance was really detailed and really helpful. So thank you for that. So my questions, just following on from colleagues, I don't want to repeat what they've already said. My questions are fairly basic. You've said that there are around 25, over 25 businesses. Can you be specific with regards to how many licences there currently are with regards to aquaculture and how many are employed in the sector?
I can't give you the numbers, but I can tell you that only a small proportion are actively being used at the moment. So we've got substantial, what we could call latent capacity. So there's a lot of licenses out there, but they're not being used to their full extent because either the water quality is too bad, which is in the case for some of the coastal sites, or some of the freshwater licenses that my colleagues operate with as well aren't being used to their full extent either.
And in the paper you did link sort of the licensing issues with inactivity and underutilisation. And is part of that due to the inflexibility within the licence?
Yes.
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 Basically, the licenses relate to a specific species, but markets change and the operators should be able to be flexible to address those market demands. And so sometimes it takes a very long time to add species, and these are all recognised aquaculture species we're talking about. We're not talking about bringing any exotics in or anything like that, but it can still take a ridiculously long time to get additional species added on.
Okay, and obviously there are barriers then for those who maybe wish to enter the industry as well, and is that particularly in relation to the criteria being applied to get a licence?
Absolutely. It's a very long, lengthy, expensive process with no certainty of outcome. So we see very, very few new licence applications going in as a result. And in terms of external investment, so globally we see a huge amount of investment, say on the likes of land-based aquaculture development. That's not happening here because the regulatory environment is such that it's off-putting to that investment.
So you've also mentioned that there's substantial growth in salmon and mussel sectors in Scotland and the Irish Republic. Can you maybe outline the difference in approach?
Absolutely. Well, it's simply that they're directly supportive and enabling of those sectors. There's in Northern Ireland, the operators are sort of left to their own devices, and DERA just apply regulation. Despite there being a remit to actually support the sector, we need to understand what support actually means here, because really they're simply applying regulation. In Scotland, there are strategies that are then implemented. To be honest, we're quite loath to ask for an aquaculture strategy because we're quite aware that there's multiple strategies out there on a whole range of different things that then don't get implemented. So we're pinning our hopes on the fisheries bill, actually having a properly streamlined process for licensing, but also more broadly, if there's support through this aquaculture action plan, through the food strategy, for example, then we might actually get some action, and that's what we're looking for.
What I'm curious to see is whether you are aware of a model elsewhere which works, that may be something that we look to from a Northern Ireland perspective.
Well, I mean, certainly Scotland has and continues to have regular reviews to check that its licensing process and its management of aquaculture is fit for purpose, and they actually have a growth strategy that they're supporting and funding as well. So Scotland is by no means perfect. I wouldn't say that there's a perfect model out there that we would point to, but certainly we can see growth in certain sectors in certain places. I don't know if you want to mention anyway.
The EU have a document which is called the Aquaculture Licensing Toolbox. So what they done, they got all the countries from around Europe, they all entered into discussion, and they basically come up with the formula of what you should go through when you're applying for an aquaculture licence. So Scotland is one who has done fairly well in that and is noted in it for different aspects. You referred to the Republic of Ireland. We acquired a farm in 2009. we asked for a change in the licence, and this is 2025. That hasn't happened. So they're going no better than up here. But Scotland is, and there are other countries within the EU which are doing very well, and they have published documents which really just outline what everybody agrees with and how it should operate. So it exists, it's there.
If I can make a couple of comments, it depends on the willingness of government to actually encourage and enable the investment to be made. This shouldn't be a matter about regulation. This should be a matter of actually looking at what's the risk associated with it. In Northern Ireland, the coastal waters for aquaculture other than shellfish are extremely challenging because of the fact that you've got huge tides and storms and so on. But interestingly, where aquaculture is going worldwide is actually land-based aquaculture, where technology is being used. And to give you an example, in the recent sector magazine that I received last week, in Iceland, a company has secured private investment. This isn't government intervention, private investment of 80 million to expand a single site. And in Norway, licence has been granted to a single site to increase its production to 50,000 tonnes on a single site. Northern Ireland, finfish, 1,000 tonnes. We need enabling, and we need people to be enlightened as to where the opportunity is, because another perhaps little known fact is that fish, including aquaculture, has just overtaken chicken as the world's largest source of protein. Where did it all go wrong? Because we're not doing it.
We're just having a conversation on protein before the meeting started, actually, so you were maybe listening.
For that, Chair, I don't know whether it's appropriate maybe to ask research, maybe to do a piece of work just in relation to that, just because we're having this conversation today, to maybe look at some of the modelling elsewhere, just to inform us for future conversations, because I'm sure this is something that we're going to be returning to, particularly in relation to the Fisheries Act as well.
Yeah, and the link to I think the food strategy is just jumping out at me in regards to the opportunity. Patsy?
Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you,
First
Michelle.
point, my apologies, gentlemen, I was delayed this morning, but I picked up and I've read your documentation, and it does raise a number of issues. I'm sure those have been captured by ourselves here. Perhaps, Chair, for raising with the officials who are responsible for this area, because clearly there's a lot of issues in there in that document as to how things have been handled. Could I ask you specifically there with regard to the zebra mussels? There is quite a bit of criticism in there about the zero risk approach being taken for aquaculture movements, and you describe it as disproportionate and inequitable. Could you maybe just expand and advise as to what's, and I know you're talking about boat movements and all that carrying on, because the informed advice is that the zebra mussels come in from the hull of boats into Lough Neagh, as they do virtually everywhere else across the world. Can you suggest what approach should have been taken or should be taken by the department in regard to this, specifically with your own sector in mind?
Stable door horses,
Oh, I know,
3 fields away. I think there's probably the answer to that. But if you look at the chronology of it, zebra mussels started off in the Lough Erne system. And the zebra mussel strategy was produced 20 years ago and identified the high risk of it coming into Lough Neagh, etc. Guess what? You've got Kinnigo Marine on the way up from Lough Erne to Belfast. So they go into the south end of Lough Neagh. They expand according to feed and climate and all sorts of things. Certainly in terms of operating at Portnack, Kilrea on the River Band since the middle 80s, they haven't been a significant issue for us. In fact, we weren't visibly aware of them until more recent times, and even then it's quite modest. But as I say, there's a slipway at the gate to my farm, and zebra mussels isn't even mentioned. And there's boats in and out every day. There are navigation boats go through the lock gates at Portnack every day up to Lough Neagh, back down again. There's absolutely no restriction in relation to every other single activity except supplying live fish from the River Bann, which does seem extremely odd.
And can I just maybe, you paused there, extremely odd. Why do you think that should be the case? Or why do you think that is the case?
I don't think I would like to say it in public.
Okay.
But let me just say, if you go back and look at the events and the facts,
Yes.
I think you will find that perhaps there is an alternative narrative which is not being made clear by the officials.
That begs the question, what narrative? You've
What
left me
is
with-
the risk associated with the appropriate containment measures that could be applied to the movement of live fish? Is there a real risk associated with it? I've investigated thoroughly because it has a commercial impact on my business. And I mentioned the opportunity of exporting to Scotland that was knocked on the head. Now, the issue there is not the wildlife order, but health certification, because it's health certificates that actually control the issue about live fish movements to the rest of GB. But whenever I raised that, the question that was asked was, do you want some zebra mussels?
Sorry, what?
Do you want some zebra mussels in simple language? That was the question that was posed to the Scottish officials.
By
Nothing to
whom?
do with health,
By whom?
by the department.
That's what you're... You know, you could have said, do you want bad weather?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Exactly. He can send you some. But yet in Scotland, where there are zebra mussels, they have actual specific plans on a county council basis how you deal with it,
And some official actually said this.
in writing.
And, Chair, I don't know what's going on there, but there's clearly, the best way to describe it is inconsistencies of approach somewhere along the line.
I shared a document with one of your committee members during the course of the past 7 days, which actually sets out very clearly what the issue is in relation to the documents I received in September 2023. And they actually say two very different things. They also misquote legislation in order to change what it actually means.
Okay. Would it be appropriate to share that with the rest of us then?
I've made it available and I'm quite happy for the committee member to do so.
Okay. That's grand. Thank you for that. Thanks,
you.
Chair.
Thank you, Patsy. Yeah, we started out with the revelation of its inconsistency and certainly some serious questions. I just want to thank you for your presentation, and I'm sure we will be in further communication. We're going to do a little bit of a wash up in regard to some items that the committee have already identified as areas that we would like to drill down on, give some more information, and we will be in communication with you guys. I just want to say, you live in the second best upper Ballinderry in Northern Ireland. The other nicer piece of upper Ballinderry is on the other side of the loch. The river isn't just nearly as nice, but it's the people are great. Just so
You're great, but
you're welcome to visit sometime.
Would it be in your constituency?
Might do, might be. Might be just pretty close to it.
another boundary.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Members, just to ensure that we have captured, there was a couple of actions in regard to that. I had picked out a piece, two pieces that I think are worthy. So it was the Belfast Harbour piece in regards to the change in Belfast Lock, the lack of production, what maybe to see what Belfast Harbour are doing that, given the increased development. Second piece was the food strategy, and to assist the Minister in that and trying to encourage the Minister. I think that would touch on your point, Michelle, of increasing the opportunity and raising the education piece. John has a piece there which is about the inland fisheries and writing to the department in regard to inland fisheries. Is that correct?
Yeah, part and parcel of this is going to have to be this movement of other vessels in and around areas where others are restricted. I mean, we're going to have to address that issue. It's been raised very directly with us here, and as well as how they intend to deal with the zebra mussel or perceived zebra mussel issue with regard to the future of the sector represented here today, and also its own angling estate stroke product to the rest of Northern Ireland, including all of those consumers who are licence payers and permit purchasers.
Spot on. Thank you. And then Michelle identified the possibility of a raised paper in regard to, so including the food strategy framework, but also the support model and agriculture sector specifically. And could I just ask, Raymond, if you don't mind, just for efficiency, if you would share the piece that you shared with a member through the clerk, or maybe myself, and we'll disseminate it out so you don't have to go and hook for 9 or 10 separate email addresses.
No, don't worry.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, members, thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. Happy enough?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can listen again to this if we need
Agenda
to.
item 5.
And we'll go back to the
Catherine, your
budget.
Gary and Pat's stop us at me on their message.
You're going to share that.
I'm going to come out.
That's okay.
Okay, members, we're actually moving back to agenda item 5. Agenda item 5 is a number of budget-related papers in the main pack, and they're in the tabled papers as follows. Page 46 of the pack of the clerk's memo from the clerk to the Committee for Finance dated the 3rd of February regarding the analysis of 24-25 outturn and forecast outturn. Pages 47 to 172 of the pack for the 24-25 public expenditure outturn and forecast outturn information for October. The RO7 position, November RO8 position and December RO9 position. The Department of Finance has committed to provide this public expenditure outturn and forecast outturn information analysis each month as part of the ongoing engagement with the Committee for Finance in order to facilitate scrutiny of the public expenditure position. The Committee for Finance agreed to copy this update each month to all statutory committees. Members, I refer you to pages 22 to 56 of the table papers for a copy of the slide pack for the briefing overview of draft budget 25-26 and budget bill 24-25 spring supplementary estimates. Members, the last briefing received on budgetary matters was on the 12th of December from the officials on the outcome of DAERA's internal considerations of the January monitoring round, and details were provided for us of the returns date to Department of Finance. At that meeting, we raised a number of concerns regarding 25-26, just transition funding and the impact of the 700 registered vacancies within the department. As we noted at our meeting last week, the Finance Committee is seeking by the 20th of February all committees' views on their Department 25-26 budget and any issues that the committee have about the Department's 24-25 budget position and management. The committee agreed to wait until it received this briefing today before preparing a response. So I welcome the following departmental officials to brief the committee on the budget and answer any questions after the briefing. Mr. Roger Downey, Director of Finance for DAERA, Mr. Declan McCarney, Deputy Finance Director for DAERA, and Ms. Nuala Hennessy, Head of In-Year Financial Planning Branch, DAERA. Thank you so much, and we're ready to rock and roll.
Okay. Thanks, Chair, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to brief the committee on DAERA's draft budget 2025-26 proposals, as well as the imminent budget bill and spring supplementary estimates in relation to the current financial year. I think you have the slide pack, so I was just proposing to go through them.
They're in the pack. You want to go through them, yeah.
Okay.
And, yeah.
I'll start with an overview of the block position for the executive. So departments bid for 4.4 billion Resourcedale against 1.3 billion that was available for allocation. On Capitaldale, there was bids totaling 2.9 billion against 1.8 billion available for allocation. And there were inescapable Capitaldale requirements across departments totaling 1.9 billion. This means that there was not enough Capitaldale available to cover all departments' inescapable capital requirements. In terms of the draft budget proposals on the next slide, you'll be aware the Executive agreed budget allocations on the 19th of December, and there's huge challenges for all departments. DAERA bid for 50.9 million Resourcedale against the opening 24-25 position and 179.2 million Capitaldale, and that was from a zero base. It's proposed that we would receive an additional 15.7 million Resourcedale and 119.5 Capitaldale. It's also proposed that we would get 332.5 million executive earmarked Resourcedale for agriculture, agri-environment, fisheries and rural development from next year. You will recall that this had been Treasury earmarked Resourcedale since EU exit, and that changed in the Chancellor's autumn budget when it became allocated to the Executive's baseline from 2025-26. The Minister subsequently made the case to the Minister of Finance that this should be executive earmarked for these purposes, and the Executive has now agreed this for 25-26 and future years. There's also 4.2 million executive earmarked Resourcedale for Peace Plus across DAERA's 5 investment areas, which when added to the 16.5 million ERDF totals 20.7 million. The next slide summarises the breakdown of DAERA's key budgets between executive earmarked and non-executive earmarked, with over half now executive earmarked on Resourcedale and around 10% executive earmarked on Capitaldale, totaling almost 716 million. Next slide then breaks down DAERA's Resourcedale. Top there is the opening baseline of 243.8, and then the additional allocation from the executive that I've already mentioned, 15.7, and then with the 2 executive earmarked pots totaling just over 596 million. You should also note that this does not include any Treasury earmarked Windsor Framework funding, as this will be allocated as part of a separate exercise with DOF and Treasury, and that may not formally conclude until around the time of June monitoring. So there's a number of issues with the draft budget, particularly on resource. So although we've got 15.7 million resource DEL, it's significantly less than our 50.9 million bids. As a result, this is an extremely difficult proposed outcome for DAERA. With the 15.7 million, the Minister is able to fund some elements of TB compensation and the associated programme, the Environmental Improvement Plan, including Lough Neagh, climate change and animal welfare. However, there are significant shortfalls in projected statutory obligations on the TB programme and in contractual pressures on pay and running costs. There's also insufficient funding to take forward all of the Lough Neagh Action Plan. So what funding is available? Well, we always aim to be as efficient as possible, and we've asked each grade 3 to deliver a 5% saving in the running costs, and this has generated £2 million for reallocation. As the rolled over position does not take into account the increase in NIA's regulatory income in 24-25 to help ensure full cost recovery in line with MPMNI, there is also £1 million available to help cover increased NIA costs. Therefore, when added to the 15.7 million additional allocation from the executive, there is 18.7 million available for allocation. How does the Minister propose to allocate this funding? Well, it's set out on the table on the next slide. This shows the original bids that went to DOF, broken down into 7 areas, totaling 50.7 million, 50.9 million. The proposed allocations include specific amounts for inescapable statutory obligations with 3.6 million for TB compensation, as well as 6.6 million for inescapable contractual pressures on pay and operational costs, and these are across the top 4 bids. There's also 2 million to take forward additional measures to help manage the incidence of TB. On bid 2, there's an additional 3.5 million for the Environmental Improvement Plan, which includes 1.6 million for the Lough Neagh Action Plan. I should note there's also 1 million in the proposed allocation in bid 2 in this table that should be in bid 3. So it says 6.8 and 1 million there. It should be 5.8 and 2 million. On bid 3, 1 million is for NIA to take forward new or additional work in relation to the Green Growth Strategy, Climate Action Plans and Environment Strategy. And bid 3 also includes 0.8 million for Climate Change Science Innovation Group to take forward climate action communications and behavioural change across departments. The proposed 0.2 million allocation in bid 5 is split between NIA and Rural Affairs Division to take forward work on Peace Plus, City and Growth Deals and the Complementary Fund. On bid 6, the proposed 0.4 million allocation is to take forward work on animal welfare legislation. And lastly, there is a 0.3 million proposed allocation to support the implementation of the Executive's Northern Ireland Food Strategy Framework, which was approved in July last year. So I suppose that proposed allocation column sets out what is being funded. So what's not being funded then? The largest element is on the BTB programme. Veterinary Service Animal Health Group is projecting an increase in compensation of 14.2 million above the 32.3 million baseline, of which the Minister proposes to allocate 3.6 million. However, this still leaves a significant shortfall of 10.6 million, and this is a statutory obligation. The Chief Veterinary Officer would also like to take forward more proactive actions to reduce the incidence of TB, and while the Minister has allocated 2 million to this, they could spend around 5 million more. There is also nothing to fund any avian influenza or blue tongue outbreaks at at this stage. In addition, there's a shortfall in funding of 2 million to take forward the Lough Neagh Action Plan after allocating 3.5 million to the EIP. There are further gaps on pay and operational costs, totalling 7 million. These are significant shortfalls across the bids, which will have to be managed in year if there's no further funding at final budget stage. And this also assumes that the employer national insurance contribution increases are fully funded by Treasury in due course. So you can see this is an extremely difficult proposed position for the department. The next slides then set out the breakdown of DAERA's Resourcedale budget based on these proposals, starting with income, and you can see there we're proposed to bring in over 35 million on income at this stage, the largest element being on NIA's regulatory income side for consents and discharges. The next largest there is the work that we do for the Food Standards Agency, particularly around the meat plants. Salaries, as you might expect, is the largest element of the non-executive earmarked funding, totaling over 150 million. And then there's a small subsidy to Forest Service. On the next page, this breaks down the funding that we provide to our NDPBs, with the largest, as you might expect, for AFBI there to cover its staff costs and its other running costs. And this is the non-research and development work in those budgets. In terms of programmes, the largest is BTB compensation, which now includes the additional 3.6 million that the Minister's allocated, which brings it up to 35.9. But as I say, is still 10.6 million short of what the vets currently project. And if you consider back in 1920, TB compensation was 19.5 million. So there's been a significant increase in the intervening period. Turning to capital, and DAERA has received a proposed allocation of 119.5 million from the executive. Although this is a 24 million increase on the opening for 24-25, it is 7 million less than our inescapable pressures. I suppose that's reflective of the wider capital position facing the executive. There is also nothing for 52.7 million high priority bids. In light of this, the Minister is proposing to overcommit 15 million on capital on the basis that there will be some slippage and the opportunity to secure additional capital during 25-26, so this can be managed down by the year end. The next 3 slides set out the breakdown of the Minister's proposals under 8 headings. The first one is a new heading and represents the first time it is proposed that DAERA receives an executive earmarked allocation for the Just Transition Fund for Agriculture. And there's 4 items in there. The Minister proposes to allocate 5 million to bovine genetic improvements, 3.7 million for on-farm capital support, 2.8 for peatland restoration, and 0.8 million for the Livestock Dietary Emissions Challenge Fund. You will also see that there is other non-executive earmarked funding for on-farm capital support and bovine genetic improvements further down the table under programmes. In terms of green growth and climate change, the largest element there is for Lough Neagh, and that's significantly up on the funding for 24-25 on capital, which was 3.2 million. Under programmes, Farming with Nature is the largest and is due to launch later this year at 4.8 million. There's also 4 million in there for the Tackling Rural Poverty and Social Isolation Programme, or TRIPSI, and 3.3 million for household waste. On the next slide, and on our IT systems, the largest element is for the Digital Transformation Programme, which enables so much of the work that goes on across the department, as well as the island system for laboratories across the DAERA family. On estates transformation, the largest element is the AFBI research vessel, which is under construction. as well as the Animal Health Science Building, which is due to start construction later this year at Stony Road, and the Ruminant Emissions Research Facility at Hillsborough. In terms of research and development, the largest element is in AFBI, and this covers staff costs and other running costs that meet the strict Treasury criteria for research and development. That's 21.8 million. And then on the last page in capital, it's just some smaller amounts for recurring capital for the likes of plant, vehicles, machinery, equipment, right across DERA, and as well as a small amount for the Whites Pots Country Park. So as you can see there, that totals 134.5 million, and that's on the basis that the Minister proposes to overcommit 15 million, as I mentioned earlier. Moving then briefly to the current financial year, and the spring supplementary estimates, vote and account and statement of excesses debate, and the 5 stages of the budget bill are due to take place between the 17th and the 25th of February. As part of the supply process, the estimates will set out in detail the amounts of cash and net resources required for public services for one financial year for each department. And the SSEs represents the final outcome at January monitoring and the changes that have taken place since the main estimates, I think last July. There's also an estimates memorandum which provides readers with a greater understanding of the information contained in the estimates template, and this is a new development for this year. I'm conscious that there are lots of tables, figures and charts in relation to the spring supplementary estimates, and we're happy to take any questions on them. We're also happy to take any questions on the draft budget proposals for next year. I understand the committee is due to submit a report to the Finance Committee later in February on the draft budget. We would welcome the committee's support for additional resource and capital funding to help address the proposed significant shortfalls that we would face next year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. That was really good, and thank you for the slides and the documentation. And I know that members have already contacted me in regards to some of the issues, so I'm sure they'll be picked out in the questions. If I could just ask you a couple of questions then at the start, particularly in regard to the opening part of the presentation, that was in regard to the proposed resource DEL allocations against the bids. You can see in bid 1 that the Minister had bid almost for 50% of the total bid at 24 million against 50.9 for the bovine tuberculosis programme, which arguably in farming cattle terms is the #1 priority. And you did make the point that I think it was 2019 the total outlay was about 10 million, we're now touching 60 million. So you can see the Minister's intent there. However, the allocation and the proposed allocation is only a quarter of what was bid for. Is there any rationale in regard to that?
I suppose you can see there's only 18.7 million available for allocation if we had got 50.9 million.
And my point being, sorry, I should probably make this better. The Minister's bid was 50% of his total bids. In that case, would have been allocated to the TB eradication programme. And if you followed that through, then the successful money that came through, you could argue, potentially should have been 50% of what was achieved. But it's a quarter.
Right, okay.
Does that make sense?
So you're
a third, sorry. Yeah. So his bid was for 50. So his bid out of 50 million was for almost 25. So it was 50% of his total bid was for TB, but actually he's allocated about a third, which is, I know what the ministerial decisions, but was there any rationale to that?
Well, I suppose TB compensation is one of the few pressures where we pick up additional funding in year.
Okay.
So historically, that's, I've been in the department 11 years. There's always, if we get anything in year, it's usually for TB compensation. So whilst the Minister was keen to increase the baseline because there is additional funding, he would be hopeful that we would get additional allocations at monitoring rounds. So in the case of this year, we got 4 million in June monitoring, and we got 1.6 million in October monitoring. So if we got an additional 5.6 million, that pushed that over the the 50% that you're referring to there, and it's that I suppose that because it's a statutory obligation, when the executive are considering pressures right across departments, that's at a higher level than maybe some of the other pressures.
And just was that initial bid made in terms of the compensation only? I mean, because I know, and it would be all of everyone's ambition, that the eradication of TB actually probably should be the primary aspect. So in terms of the 24 bid, was all of that for compensation, or was there an element of that was for the eradication scheme?
There was 14.2 million was for TB compensation, 7.1 million was to take forward actions to help mitigate the incidence of TB. So when the Minister's allocated 2 million towards those actions, so there's 5.6 million in total going, I suppose, to the TB programme.
Well, it'd be really good to, given the rise, as you've pointed out, like it's almost a 600% increase over a period of 6 or 7 years in terms of that compensation piece. Is that correct?
So it was back in 1920, it was 19.5 million.
1920, 2019, hopefully.
2019.
Yes, good.
So it was 19.5 million. So the projected TB compensation for this year is 41.7, and for next year it's 46.5. So
those are significant burdens.
It is, yeah.
Always on the department, and as you've said, they're statutory obligations, so therefore there's that premise. Can I ask you a wee question? I asked the Minister, just and you definitely the team to answer this one. What's the difference between earmarked and ring fenced?
I suppose in layman's terms, it's exactly the same. So in technical terms, so Treasury have three DEL budgets that we manage. So there's Capital DEL, which is capital. There's non-ring fenced resource DEL, which is everyone refers to as resource DEL, which is your salaries, your wages, your running costs, your programs. And then there's ring fenced resource DEL, which is your non-cash depreciation. So to avoid any confusion between what Treasury call ring-fenced resource DEL, which is non-cash depreciation, Department of Finance refers to any ring fencing as earmarked. So just that there's no confusion.
I was thinking it might have been more of an agricultural term, just to go with the ear tags and earmarked. I have a final question then in regard to the bidder for the environmental improvement plan, including Loughney delivery, because it's obviously a significant priority for all of us tackling the issues in Loughney. Are there any identified issues or things that perhaps will not be able to be rolled out or implemented, given that the bid is 50% less than what the Minister had bid for?
Well, there's 1.9 million going towards, I suppose, specific actions in the environmental improvement plan, excluding Loughney. There's 1.6 million for Loughney across NIA, EMFG, CCSIG and FFRAG, and that's to take forward 16 actions in the Loughney action plan. But there's 3 actions that will not be able to be taken forward. Action 37, Action 17 and Action 21, and they total around 2 million.
Could you briefly just tell us what those are? I don't have them in front of me, just if you don't mind.
So Action 17 is to scope and report on the most effective wastewater treatment systems. Action 21 is a grant programme to support organisations working to improve water quality and Loughney conservation. And Action 37 is the ability to respond to blue-green algae reports and analysis to inform operators as outlined in the interagency protocol. So the 3 of those total 2 million. So there's just not enough resource to do everything, but there was 16 actions where you could do a small amount. So 1.6 million can cover 16. At June monitoring last year we got 1.5 million specifically for Loughney. So if there's nothing extra at final budget, we would be bidding for the 2 million because we got an allocation last year, and as you know, at that time of year the blue-green algae starts to bloom again. So we may get additional funding around that time, but we'll just have to wait and
The
see.
problem with getting additional funding in here, if, for instance, for number 21, which is the grant programme for water quality, is that those people that would be placed to do that might not be in place. I know the Minister had announced a number of months ago that there were 5 successful applicants for a scheme to trial solutions. Is that what we're talking about here? Is that still going? Is that still...
That's STULS, the
Yeah,
sustainable.
I think it is, yeah. Is it? That's not what we're talking about here?
No, it's
Okay, it's...
That's a capital scheme.
Okay.
This is a resource grants scheme.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that. I really appreciate your detail in the answers. Okay, Declan. You're happy? Okay. Anya, you're going to go.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Roger, for giving us that comprehensive briefing. I just want to zero in on the Rural Affairs capital deal. There's been an uplift, I think, of 2.9 million. Now, look, I appreciate you might know off the top of your head what specific programmes that's going to be, that additional money is going to be introduced into. I'm assuming it's an uplift possibly into TRIPSI.
Sorry, where's that?
Let me get the
Capital.
table. It's in some of the tables there now. That was me comparing it to the last.
Is this on 24-25? Is this the spring supplementary estimates, or is this the budget?
This is the budget.
I think there will be an allocation for that.
TRIPSI, 4 million capital. So
Should have been in round 2.9.
we see 4 million for TRIPSI, and 2.9 is not. I don't know what page that is. Sorry, I don't want to give you the wrong answer.
No. Well, if you want, Roger, you can just get back to me just specifically on that, because I know it's a specific enough request. And just under the AME point, now this is in relation to Mobile. There's £108 million of additional resources that's been allocated due to a potential technical accounting adjustment. Could you expand further, I suppose, on exactly why that has had to be made?
So yes, so AME budget cover, it's for a provision.
Mm-hmm.
So as it says there, it's a technical accounting issue involving the assessment of International Accounting Standard 37 and whether it should apply to the latest position on Mobile. So this has been an issue for this last couple of years where the audit office have looked at the work that's been going on and said that the department should be including provision. We've looked at all the analysis, the contextual factors, the legal obligations around this, as well as what the Minister has said in the Assembly. And it's so in the last couple of years we haven't made a provision, but there may be, when we take a view, when we're doing the accounts at the end of this year, there may be a need to make a provision. But we can't wait until we're actually doing the accounts to get the budget cover. So we've applied to, there's various windows during the year where you can apply for AME cover. So it's, I suppose, part of prudent financial planning. We bid for it then for 108 million. If it comes to pass that when the department's preparing the accounts in April that things haven't moved on, then we won't need that. But we have the headroom should we need it at that stage. So we have to work through the accounting standard in light of the latest information.
Just based on what you said previous to that, Roger, I think it was in and around international accounting standards. How does that factor in? I suppose that's more of a point of curiosity, Chair, than anything else.
Well, I suppose there's a whole range. That's International Accounting Standard 37. So there's dozens of accounting standards that we as accountants have to follow, along with guidance from the Department of Finance when we're preparing our accounts at the year end, so that preparers of accounts prepare their accounts on a consistent basis, so that the readers can compare our department with other departments, and it's done on a consistent basis. So that particular standard relates to the determination of provisions at the year end. So we just have to work through that process. My boy's just one provision that'll be considered. along with others, and depending on the level of evidence and how it aligns with the criteria and the standard, we'll make a call of whether we make a provision or it's a contingent liability.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you.
So, just in terms of your TRIPSI query, TRIPSI capital in this financial year's 5.7 final. I think you're maybe comparing opening capital last year to opening capital this year. So TRIPSI this year is closing out at 5.7 capital. Okay.
Okay, Anya?
Yeah,
Thank you. Okay, Patsy?
Thanks very much, Chair. I want to come 2 or 3 items, but first of all, I represent a good part of the western shore of Lough Neagh, so whenever I see nice wee photo shots at which three executive ministers announced that Lough Neagh, in fact, was a key priority for the executive, and now we see there's insufficient funding to take forward all of the Lough Neagh Action Plan. What was the shortfall there again, please, just?
So, shortfall's 2 million across 3 actions on resource.
Yeah, and notice sorry, the what, Roger? What was that second bit? 2 million plus?
2 million across 3 actions, but,
Yes,
but that's on
3
resource.
actions you outlined there, yeah.
But on capital, there's a significant increase on the funding available to take forward Lough Neagh. So in the current financial year, there was 3.2 million capital. Next year,
An increase from what base?
so for 24-25, the current year, there's 3.2 million. So
Yes.
This was the first year that
So
we had
it's a
capital.
significant increase compared to nothing. Is that what you're saying? Yes.
No, but for 25-26,
Yes.
so it's 12.8 million.
Right. Okay.
So it's an increase of 9.6 million from the current financial year
Yes.
to next financial year.
Okay.
So whilst there's a shortfall of 2 million on resource to take forward the Lough Neagh Action Plan in 3 specific actions, there's an additional 9.5 million on capital that we didn't have in the current financial year.
Right, which is a fair point. Okay. Can I just ask now? There's 2 or 3 things there, specifically, and the chair did mention it. A 10.6 million shortfall on bovine TB. Now, does that include the figures that received before? I think you projected it to be around about 60 million the last time you were in here. That doesn't include veterinary costs or anything.
No,
like
that's
that.
purely the compensation element.
That's purely compensation. And then there's the veterinary. Is there a shortfall regarding the expenditure on veterinary costs? Or veterinary expenditure, I should say.
Well, I suppose the rest of the TB programme is largely balanced out, but the shortfall in the programme is in the compensation element because it's...
But, right. But is the amount of veterinary input not conditional upon the effects of what they're doing on the ground? So are you telling me then that there'll still be significant veterinary costs and they'll not be changed, or in fact they could go up, but the compensation isn't going to be there? What I'm looking at is the Department of Finance basically telling DAERA, look, your bovine TB action plan, you're on a bit of a recycler at the moment. Really, you need to be focusing on the ground actions, getting your action plan out there to reduce the incidence of bovine TB. To do that, I'm just looking at this expenditure, because if you don't, or you collectively, the department, have a 10.6 million shortfall at the minute, what kind of situation is that potentially going to leave you in whenever the compensation claims come in and stack up to the department?
Yes, it's as I said, in 2019-20, the compensation was only 19.5 million. Mm. It's projected to be, into the mid-40s for next year. So that's a huge jump.
And top that up with your veterinary costs.
Yes, it's on top of that. And I think the chief vet presented to the committee his plan back in November. So there's the strategy, and there's a delivery plan that's been firmed up at the minute.
Was that moved to a strategy now, because it was presented that day as the chief veterinary officer's own thoughts or own paper?
Sorry, I've maybe used the wrong terminology there. So the chief vet was here at the end of November presenting
Yes.
his findings. So my understanding is that at the next stage is an action plan on the back of that. So as part of that, that will help reduce a plan to help reduce
I know
the
it's
level of
not
incidents.
specifically your age, but do you know when this action plan is going to manifest itself?
I don't have
It's a wee
a
bit like Groundhog Day with this one, to be honest. But out with your control, I know. Then can we move just one final question, Chair? And that's the concept of just transition has been about quite a while, and what monies are specifically available for the just transition, and in what lines of expenditure, please?
So on the first capital slide there in your pack, the executive for the first time has allocated DARA executive earmarked funding for a just transition fund for agriculture totaling 12.3 million.
Yes.
So the Minister has decided to allocate that across four
Yes, I heard
areas.
you referring to that earlier. Now, specifically, could you tell me what that's for?
So there's four areas: the bovine genetic improvements,
Yes.
on-farm capital support, peatland restoration, and the livestock dietary emissions challenge fund.
Yes. So, and do you know how those are going to be administered, or the capital fund in particular? What's the sum total of that?
There's the bovine genetic improvements. It's 5 million.
Yes.
On-farm capital support is 3.7 million. Peatland restoration is 2.8, and the livestock dietary emissions challenge fund is 0.8.
And the capital fund specifically, what's that directed towards, please?
The livestock dietary emissions challenge fund,
You mentioned the capital fund.
or the
On-farm,
on-farm capital
yes.
support. It's so I suppose it's the Farm Business Improvement Scheme, Tier 2, Tranche 2. So it's designed to support farm transformation and provides grants for projects costing over £30,000. So it's on the larger scale investments. So there's 3.7 for it within the executive earmarked just transition fund for agriculture, but there's also a further 3.1 million for on-farm capital support that's non-executive earmarked as well. So there's 6.8 million going to that project in total.
Okay. It might be helpful, Chair, if we got maybe some idea as to the sorts of projects that would be directed towards. I don't mean specific today. If you haven't got that detail, maybe you could follow up with a letter. That would be great.
I wouldn't have. I know there's a long list.
And I
of
get that
projects
because
in that,
just and what types of farms it's being directed towards, because there's big farms, there's medium-sized farms, and there's small farms, and we'd want to make sure that those most likely to be disadvantaged or otherwise are getting their fair crack of the whip too. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, members, are there any other questions for the team? No.
Just.
Oh, sorry, you must say a little one.
My question's probably really been asked because it was because on the capital DEL, obviously on-farm capital support and bovine genetic improvements were detailed twice, so it was really just to get an explanation as to where that money was coming from. But obviously it's a much bigger programme than just through the Just Transition Fund.
Yes, it's just, I suppose we've got two pots of money now. We've got executive earmarked and then non-executive earmarked. So I thought it was better to split that out so you know what's executive earmarked and what's not. But in total, you're right, you just add the two together to get a bigger amount for those projects.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your presentation and your time, team. And we will see you at the next one.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, members. Thank you. Okay, members, we're now bouncing back into agenda item 7, which is the agriculture bill. We're going to refer you to pages 185 to 186 of the pack, which is a follow-up correspondence from the Northern Ireland Mushroom Growers Association after they briefed the committee last week. Is there for you in your pack. Also, members, if you have any comments, are you content to note that? And then we're going to return to these matters once we commence our deliberations on the bill. The members, following the briefing from RAISE on the 16th of January, wrote to the department requesting a response to the range of queries and issues raised in the briefing paper and discussed at that session. Members, those are in your papers at pages 70 to 83 of table papers for the response from the department on the queries that we raised. Does anyone want to raise any of those matters, or content to note as they're in your papers? Yeah. Okay, members. What I'm going to suggest now, it's 12 o'clock, is we're going to have a short break, okay, as we alluded to at the very start, and the clerk's going to seek an update just on where we are in regard to the other SR which had been on our agenda. So we're going to go into a short break and then we'll reconvene in about 3 or 4 minutes maximum, guys, if that's okay. Thank you.
Committee Room 21. Sound. 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 Committee Room 21. Sound.
Okay, agenda item 8, guys, is the draft SR, the Waste Fees and Charges Amendment Regulations to 2025. Refer you to pages 188 to 195 in the pack, to the letter from the Department dated 20th of January for information on the draft SR, the Waste Fees, Charges Amendment Regulations. Also refer you to pages 84 of the table papers to correspondence from the Examiner of Statutory Rules. The SR is required to bring into effect the annual uplift to the Northern Ireland Environmental Agency (NIEA) waste charging scheme for 2024-25. As the increase in fees for 24-25 is higher than the standard inflationary measure, the regulations are laid in the draft affirmative procedures. The Examiner of Statutory Rules has advised that the SR will be included in the next ESR report and it will not be drawn to the special attention of the Assembly members. We were briefed on this matter at our meeting on the 23rd of January and the committee agreed that the Department proceed to lay the draft SR. There have been no changes since the SL1 was submitted to the committee. Members, as the procedure is draft affirmative, there will be a debate in the plenary. Have you any comments on this? Are you content that the committee supports the SR as drafted in that debate next week? Content? Thank you. Next agenda item is SR 2025-11, the Animals Identification Record Movement and Enforcement Amendment Regulations 2025. I refer you to pages 197 to 211 in the pack, to the letter from the Department dated 23rd of January for the information on the SR, the Animal Identification Record Movement Enforcement Amendment Regulations known as 2025. The rule is subject to the Assembly's negative resolution procedure, and there have been no changes to policy content since the SL1 was submitted to the committee. We were briefed on this at our meeting on the 23rd of January when we heard that the Department intended to make this SR, which will ensure that secondary legislation relating to cattle, sheep and goat identification, registration and movement, the IRM, is operable and provides a legally enforceable IRM system by updating references to repeal EU instruments in domestic legislation and inserting a reference to the equivalent animal health law provision or to any delegated or implementing legislation. Members at the meeting on the 23rd, the committee heard that it was only the most severe cases of non-compliance with IRM that would be referred to the PPS for potential prosecution. The committee supported the need for robust farm-to-fork traceability, but there were concerns expressed by some members regarding the degree of divergence from the west of the UK as the animal health legislation is listed in Annex 2 to the Windsor Framework. The committee did note the need to bring back legal certainty and be able to utilise and take forward prosecutions for severe cases of non-compliance. Members, you will recall that there was not a consensus, but a vote was taken and recorded in the minutes with the majority of the committee members present agreeing that the Department proceeded to make the SR. The committee divided, 5 yes, 3 abstentions. At that point there was no no's. I am not going to put the question on that SR. That the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has considered Statutory Rule 2511, the Animal Identification Records, Movements and Enforcement Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland, and has no objection to the rule pending the Examiner of Statutory Report rules. Are there any objections, or are we agreed?
Objecting.
Okay, we're going to go for a vote then. Okay, members. Do we have agreement that the statutory, that the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has considered Statutory Rule 2511, the Animal Identification Record, Movement Enforcement Regulations 25, pending the Examiner of Statutory Rules? All those in favour say aye or raise their hands. In favour of the statutory rule?
You're removing it?
Yeah, in favour. 4 in favour. Okay, this is good. 4 against. Okay.
That's some stuff. Okay.
Right. So the vote falls if it's on a tie. Just sort of clarification from the clerk in terms of the vote and what we do with an issue like this. So that will mean that
Chair does not have a casting vote on committee, so the proposition falls if it doesn't have a majority. So if it's 4-4, then this is a negative resolution AR, so you can't agree to put down a private annulment.
Okay.
It's 4-4.
So the committee will not be presenting it. Well, I'm not sure. They obviously will be speaking on the debate.
No, this is a negative resolution. So this one. Okay, this rule is subject. This is the IRM, and it's subject to negative resolution procedure. So that the law, I mean, it has currently been made, and the option for the committee is to vote on a prayer of annulment. But as we've just heard from, I've just heard from the clerk's assistant, I just double checked it. There's no casting vote for the chair. So.
Okay.
What does that mean technically then?
That it remains in.
So there'll be no prayer of annulment?
No casting vote for the chair?
Yeah. Vote falls on a tie, and we have 8 members here today. So. Okay.
Let me clarify that. So we've tied vote. I don't have the casting vote, so the
Proposition falls if it doesn't have a majority.
And the proposition was that the committee support, so therefore the committee doesn't support?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's a negative resolution SR, so it is already in law.
Yes, it has no effect.
It has no effect, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just for clarification, just through the chair to the clerk, is there an opportunity for another party then to bring this forward as a prayer of annulment? So it can be done outside of the processes of committee?
Yeah, yeah. It just means the committee itself
Doesn't
hasn't done that, isn't doing it, yeah.
Which is a tie vote, so.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, let's mark that one down too. Remember that one?
Levy.
Okay, members?
More or less, yeah.
Okay. Next agenda item is was to be the Farm Sustainability Transitional SR. However, we haven't received an updated SR as yet, so therefore we can't discuss it.
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, that's the preliminary SR, the Examiner of Statutory Rules, and nothing has come forward yet.
It was apparently relayed this morning, but then had to go back to the department again on another matter of certification. And so far it hasn't been. So Chair, we
basically moving that to the next.
Well, we discussed the option that potentially if the committee wishes to write to the Minister to say that he doesn't move it because you haven't seen it. You've seen the SL1 and you've commented on it.
I think this is something I picked up in the Chamber with one of the Minister's answers this week when we had the prayer of annulment, that it would be to keep all of us technically right, is that we should write to the Minister on this in regard to seeking him not to move it based on the fact that we haven't seen it today and there has been no time to discuss it further. Which is no indication of where the just on the record, it's no indication of where the committee is in regard to this, other than we haven't got it today, technically, actually in front of us, or technically correct. Members content with it?
Yeah, Chair, can I just check what we're recording? I know there appeared to be conversations earlier. I want to know what's going into the minute, obviously, so am I correct in saying there was an approach to the committee from a source, which hopefully we can also record,
The
say
examiner of
Examiner of
statutory
statutory rules
Okay.
was the
Contact
ASR.
to say there had been some issue identified,
Probably
further
technical in nature.
further information was being sought from the department by whom? The examiner or us?
Chair, the examiner of statutory rules goes back to the department and asks them to redraft and correct the technical difficulties. Then it apparently did come back to the business office. I was confirmed this, but only this morning. But there was another issue
Back since
in
then.
terms of the lane of the SR, so it's gone back to the department again.
Okay.
Thank you.
It seems to be very
You can record that.
it seems to be
Yeah.
pretty much technical in nature, to be fair, as opposed to changes to the SR at all. So, yeah.
Chair, will we get the opportunity to see it before?
Well, it's in the Minister's remit, as I understand, to move it or not on Tuesday, regardless of this, and I suspect he probably will choose not to. I know it's a priority to do it because it unlocks a lot of other useful, and it'll be a good one to do. I suspect, however, it'll be up to the Minister whether he moves it or not. And I think that's the bit in the letter that I'd just like to capture, that unless there's a significant reason why he wouldn't, reason why he would maybe seek to delay it by a week, perhaps. So, and that would give us a chance then, obviously, to look at the SR as accepted by the examiner of statutory rules.
Chair, it might just be worth highlighting that if we had it in front of us, that we had correspondence from the APSG. That they were.
Yes, because we did have a lot of discussion on this, and we agreed last week to write out to the APSG stakeholders. However, and the letter did go out, by the way, okay? So it's in table papers at 107 to 111, by the way, if you want to for detail. The quote from the correspondent: APSG stakeholders, this is a letter that we received from the chair of the APSG. Stakeholders supported that both the Young Farmers Payment and the Regional Reserve should continue until 2025. The continuation of these schemes beyond 2025 was not an option. The development of the proposed introduction of a farming for the generation scheme as the policy instrument to support generational renewal going forward is ongoing, and APSG welcomes the opportunity to engage in this conversation, as well as all the other DAERA's new programmes of farm support. And just to also bring one more thing to your attention before bringing in Declan, also refer members to correspondence at pages 112 to 114 of the table papers from two member groups of the APSG, the NI Meat Exporters Association and the NI Grain Trade Association, stating that they are in support of the SR, and the correspondence as outlined previously from the chair of the ASPG. Declan?
Yeah, Chair, just a note from the correspondence and your comments there, that the APSG says that this was not an option. I don't know where it's appropriate to ask for an amendment now before we get the revised SR, but I do believe that should be an option. There should be an option that that new entrants, the option to apply for new entrants should continue until we are in a position to move into the new scheme. Now, we need to see the shape of the new scheme and more detail, and perhaps the Minister will be in a position to provide that, but I do think that we're asking to end one scheme before, and leaving a gap before we see the shape of the new scheme.
Just for clarity and confirmation, the letter did go out to all the members, which is to ensure that there was full coverage, to get a full response from agri farmers and environmental groups that were involved in that. That's an indication of some of the responses so far. I think Declan's point's well made in terms of we can't make an amendment to it, but the Minister, if he so wishes to, and I do believe the Minister has some ambition in that space. So in terms of our correspondence to the Minister, just want to make sure that we have a consensus or whatever in regard to that.
Chair, I'd like to, obviously I think it'd be helpful too, and I know it's well hard to, perhaps it's not fleshed out fully yet, but it would be really, really helpful to get more details of the Farming for Generations and what timelines we're, for example, we're talking about.
We can seek some clarity around that. Yeah, I think that's. And then, Michelle, did you want to speak to the
It's on it's on the same point really, and I suppose it just sort of adds to the frustration that I have in the fact that the department is bringing forward ASL1s very late to the committee and not giving us the opportunity at all really to bring in other witnesses, to have further conversations. And it's not necessarily because we don't have the power to change the legislation once it's secondary legislation, but we still should have the opportunity to influence if we do have concerns, and that opportunity isn't being given to us. And I see even for next week's in the forward work programme that again there'll be another SL1 come to us. We'll receive it on Monday. And we'll be required to make a decision on Thursday without actually having the opportunity to speak to others within the sector. So I suppose, just to reiterate, I suppose the point, I think it would be useful to include that in our correspondence back to the department, and the fact that there is frustration on behalf of members that and I'm assuming everyone is in agreement with that, because this is our business of scrutiny and we're not being given adequate time to do that.
Okay.
I agree with that. I think it makes common sense. Legislation, SRs coming to us on the day, and no scrutiny doesn't make any logical sense. We're here to scrutinise.
Well, I think, yes, everybody here, I think, was in the last legislative timetable, and what I'm very aware of is that in the very near future we're going to be inundated with all types of legislation, not just pursuant to this committee, and that stretches all our bandwidth. So I think the point's well made, and if we could reflect that in a letter to the Minister, and that's as much as being helpful. I think.
Chair, essentially the SL1, whenever it comes, like that one comes next week, that is the opportunity for the committee to start, to take further views after that. But the issue is the gap really between the SL1 and the SR. If they're too close together, you don't, and the date with which the department actually lays it, particularly if it's negative, or schedules the debate.
Back to the question last week, and the time frame doesn't allow us then to get that, if we want to seek that stakeholder, the invites and the reflection of it, and it's not, we can't be seeking to elongate essential changes. There's some of these changes are essential, and has been indicated by some of the stakeholders too, but our job is also to apply the levels of scrutiny, because when these things go in, they're going to be in for a long time and will have wide-ranging impacts. Are we content on that? Is that okay? Have you got enough there?
Chair,
yes.
Just to be clear, I'm not sure that I am. I think there's a double-barrelled approach here on this. Mm-hmm. First of all, we're looking retrospectively at information we sought last week, and we've received that information. And the information we've received is exactly as was presented to us last week by departmental officials. It's confirmation.
Some, John, to be fair, because
all of it. It's confirmation.
What we set out was, and I think I referenced this quite clearly last week, is that there was a statement from the department and the chair to say that there was a broad consensus, and what we were saying was, but it's to get that individual reflection.
Agreement,
that was all.
It's agreement, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, it's clearly agreement. The stakeholder group, I think, to deal with them respectfully. If a stakeholder group is formed and tasked with coming forward with a decision or recommendation or agreement, and they've reached agreement, it's been presented to us twice, then we should accept that. So I'm not in a position where I can go back starting to challenge what I've been told on two separate occasions, including and most especially having been told it just for this meeting by the actual stakeholder group that we're talking about, and there are a number of participants in that stakeholder group who have confirmed that. So I really can't challenge that further or be party to any challenging of that. That's not going to happen. The second one is on what Declan raised there. I'm not at all opposed to seeking further information around future arrangements for young farmers, but I also know that this transitional payment will have to move ahead if we're going to make progress.
Yeah, that does. I mean, it's been very clear.
And again, in relation to that, there's broad agreement for it happening, and the stakeholder group tasked with looking at this by the department have said very clearly they did not expect it to continue beyond the date that the committee would then be talking about, so I wouldn't be comfortable with challenging that.
And to be very clear, it has not been delayed by the committee because it's being delayed because it wasn't right, technically right. The department did not bring forward a technically competent document, so, and we don't have the power to delay it, to be fair. Either the Minister could move it on the date. Anya?
Yeah, Chair, just maybe this is a secondary point in relation to that stakeholder group. Could we write to the department and ask when the last date that stakeholder group actually met?
There's no issue with the question. The only thing I would say is that the stakeholder group have been in touch to further outline that they were content. That was the only thing, So I think it's a reasonable question. I take John's point. We're not necessarily seeking to rake over the coals in regard to this, but I think it's a fair point. And we will report on the responses from each of the stakeholders if and when they do. The Minister obviously has the power to table this and move on it. This committee will just have to be on its toes when that happens. But I think with what's happened and with the response, I think the Minister probably will. Just want to make sure we've got a consensus on this. If not, this is the first point that Declan had raised, which is to ask the Minister if there's scope to extend the provisions within the SR. And if that was the case, I think that would absolutely copper fasten.
Yes.
And in that regard, it is just in terms that there's no gap between the closure and opening of a new scheme, which the Minister has indicated that's his intention, I believe. Isn't that right? Or not? You're not sure?
Chair.
Well, the Minister, I suppose, is going to be able to clarify that point, because it's up to the Minister to move it or not. John?
No, I'm not content.
Right, okay.
The position of the stakeholder group has been made clear in writing to the committee, and therefore I can't go against what they have stated clearly is their agreement in the first instance, and secondly, they've stated clearly what their expectations were or weren't in relation to extensions, and that the letter's there for the record. So no, I won't be challenging that.
Are you making a formal proposal for that, Declan?
Yeah, I think it's appropriate that we, as a committee, should make the point that we're concerned of a gap between the ending of one scheme, the starting of another scheme, and asking the Minister to take that on board to either look at the option of allowing the Regional Reserve new entrant scheme to continue until the new scheme would come in, or no, I think that could be one suggestion, and we also need, if possible, get as much detail and timelines, application process, and the shape of the new scheme.
No difficulty with that. That's
the second bit is just a technical response, and the first one, obviously,
timelines and it's a continuity issue. No issue.
Okay.
No issue.
So,
It can be noted in any letter
Yeah.
who did or did not agree with.
is there anybody? So John has indicated that he perhaps would, in terms of point one, wouldn't necessarily be supportive of that. Is there anybody else wants to register that wouldn't be in support of that piece? No? Okay, so just to note, John, that that'll be captured in the letter. Is that okay? Okay, rather than a formal vote. Thank you very much. I'm content with that. Okay, members.
And in the minutes, yeah.
The stakeholder group would make clear what their expectations are. If this committee is asking separately about arrangements on continuity, I have no major issue with that.
Thank you, John.
Chair, is the committee content that this all goes in one letter to the Minister, that we're asking him not to move it because we didn't have a thing, or that there's other issues, or do you want to keep the two things separate?
I think they're two separate letters, to be honest.
They might
I think
be
because they're not
separate,
moving it as a completely different. It's a different issue. It's around the fact that we just haven't seen the completed technical.
And there is no letter asking him not to move it. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know. I think the committee, because we haven't seen it, John. We haven't seen it. We haven't seen it. That's would be otherwise if we didn't, would be just accepting that on Tuesday we'd possibly move it and we haven't seen it.
Okay.
Okay. Is that okay?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, Trish. Okay, we're here now, aren't we?
Yes.
Yes. Agenda item 10, I think it is, guys. Departmental written briefing consideration of DAERA Corporate Plan 25-27. As I stated earlier, this item is not being considered today, but it was taken out. We're going to return to it when it's been reissued to us. Correspondence, agenda item 11, refer to pages 214 of the pack. Correspondence dated 28th of January from Mark Durkin, MLA, advising on the upcoming consultation for his private members' Bill, the Environment and Nature Restoration Bill. Members, the aim of the bill is to establish a legal framework for environmental governance and make provisions for specific improvement of the environment, including measures on nature and biodiversity. The bill aims to achieve and maintain a healthy environment and fulfil various political and legal commitments. Consultation will run for 12 weeks, from Wednesday 5th of February until Wednesday 30th of April 2025. Any comments you can tend to note? Wish him well with that. Members, if you refer to correspondence pages 215, 216 of the pack from the Chair of the Public Accounts Committee dated 3rd of February and to the guidance notes page 217, 219 of the pack. The guidance note was developed in consultation with the Northern Ireland Audit Office and is intended to provide clarity in the respective roles of the PAC, CNAG and the Statutory Committees in operation of the primacy of convention. The guidance sets out the role of the PAC, the circumstances in which primacy ends, and the guidance on scrutiny in relation to NIAO reports and ministerial directions in order to support the effective scrutiny across committees in line with the spirit of primacy and contribute to effective working relations between the PAC and the C&AG and statutory committees. Are members content to note? Any comments? Yep. Thank you, members. Okay, forward work plan. A new draft forward work plan can be found in the table of papers at pages 85 to 88. If I can draw your attention to the following items that were listed last week on the forward work plan for our meeting on the 13th of February. SL1, the Suckler Cow Scheme Regulations, Northern Ireland 2025. Then SL1, the Farming for Sustainability Knowledge Transfer Payment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2025. These items are dependent on the Farm Sustainability Transitional Provision Regulations 2025 being agreed in plenary. So
just stop there because that's changed.
Okay, that's
now.
going to, yeah, that's obviously going to change, and it's the piece that I suppose the department is making us aware of, that in how these things will proceed, they're interdependent. So, the department has requested. Yeah, the department has requested to bring forward the direct payment to farmers amendment regulations on the 13th of February instead. So, our members agreed. Yeah. Okay. I would also highlight that the written briefing.
What are you asking us to agree to?
So,
that we replace
an
the
item
two that can't come with the
this
new,
one?
with
Yes,
the new
SL1,
SL1, the one you referred to.
Suckler Cow will replace it.
The only thing about that is, again, my concern that we may then be rushed into something, because obviously this is now being
We will have officials
brought
next
forward,
week.
but
Yeah.
we need to have time.
Well, maybe if by bringing it forward, we're not necessarily bringing the SR being tabled forward, we're giving ourselves that. I mean, if we see it in terms of the end of that, it's an additional week of scrutiny, maybe it'd be a good thing as opposed to.
Well, as long
Because
as it's
it's-
giving us adequate time,
Yeah.
that if we do feel that we need to bring witnesses in to discuss it, that we are permitted to do that, and it's not something that's going to be then laid the following Tuesday, and we're again sort of fighting this fire again.
Yeah. I think that's something we will react to on the individual basis of what comes in front of us and the technical nature of it. So there's no reason for not bringing it to next week then, really. Anyway, it's the 13th of February, which is next week. Yeah, day before Valentine's Day, guys. Just so you know, no excuses. Okay. I'm going to also highlight that the written. There's Patsy ordering his flowers already. Good man, online. I was also highlighting that the written briefing that was to be considered today, the consultation, the strategic environmental assessment, environmental report for the combined ammonia strategy and operation protocol has been rescheduled by DARE until the end of March. Do members have any comments on that one, or you agree that we now move?
Sorry, it's not just says March. I don't have a date as to whether it's mid-March or end of March.
All right, okay.
Thanks.
Sometime in March.
Yes. Thanks.
Okay. Are we agreed that the forward work plan is now published as amended? Yeah. Okay, members, any other business?
Nope. Chair, one issue just maybe, and Patsy named last week about the storm and about getting maybe NIE in to give us a briefing on. But what about Forestry Service? Because
good idea.
There's a lot of lines that goes through the forestry, and there's a lot of damage that's been caused. And I think if you take a look at the the people that had to wait to the end nearly before they got on again, it was all due to the number of trees that were down in forests. It may well be that there's something they need to be doing there to keep the trees back from the lines in future. So maybe we should get something in from them,
Yep. Agreed.
Great. Michelle?
Just in addition to that, obviously, as a consequence of the storm, farmers will have been impacted, I suppose, not only sort of with trees and so on, but also their buildings. And there may be some who maybe have to remove buildings, and then we'll have to go through the whole process of planning and having to deal with the ammonia protocols as well. So just we're conscious of that, and whether the department will give any consideration in giving support to farmers around that.
Yeah, 100%. No, I think it's happy.
Sure, there's a way. It's not necessarily for this department, but it is, and that's the whole issue of fibrous. The connectivity there, and more importantly, their customer services has been woeful in getting back to people and informing people as to what's to happen. I think we're meeting them later on today, but it's been pretty poor. Now, they did get a lot of money, bags of money from public funds to deliver the service on the ground, but part of that, I don't know whether conditionality would be the right word, would be that a good, effective customer services be provided with that?
The customer service and also the rural proofing, because there's no doubt that this is where things haven't been rural proof. It's not necessary. It's maybe the estate that they inherited, possibly, but the realities for us as legislators with rural proofing and that rural impact is something we should need to be very interested in, I would suggest, Patsy.
This affects just not alone domestic consumers, if you want to call them that, but also businesses as well.
Could it be possible, Chair, to maybe, I don't know, get Fibrous in here under that rural element?
We can add that to it. I think
actually most of their infrastructure is actually in rural areas, given the nature of the rollout.
I think it's right, and the other justification is that DAERA contributed towards the Project Stratum, which Fibrous came out of. So there is justification because there's an investment from DAERA in it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I think we'll get that on the a fairly urgent.
Can be clear that with the agreement of those who have raised it, but I think if we could possibly widen it out slightly for bringing Fibrous in, it would be general provision discussion as well, not simply storm reaction. Hopefully, I mean, I've recently raised, for example, a change in practice of where they used to put underground cables. There are now overhead cables, which frankly are quite low, causing concerns, affecting sight lines for residents, crisscrossing across roads. I've raised specific examples of this in my own constituency, and if we can extend a bit to that, but focus on the storm, if colleagues are happy.
Mobile coverage is another significant issue, but to be honest, in terms of the comms mobile, because some people rely on data. When this goes down, so I think, is there a piece we could do on that collectively then, maybe in the communications space then, if we're going to do a more general piece? Is that okay? Okay, guys, we'll flesh that out. If you don't mind, I need to literally go off here.
Timing, Robert?
Sorry?
Good timing.
Just suggesting that there, and I don't want to delay you, Robbie, would that be an issue for both committees, economy and
another three things to raise?
You do, aye. I'm the chair. The gavel's about to go down.
For economy and ERA.
Perhaps I can chair this away and
look
into it a bit more.
Right.
Just to get it done right.
I can't hear any of you anymore, by the way. I'm not even looking up to see if you're putting your hands up. Date and time of the next meeting is on Thursday the 13th of February, and it's at RSPB window on Wildlife Centre at 10 a.m. Just I know the clerk and the team will look after this, but let's ensure witnesses are also aware of where they're going to be meeting us next week, and that they don't come here by mistake. Thank you very much. It was a really good committee meeting. See you in the chamber on Monday. Thank you. Thank you.
Committee Room 21. Sound.